Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. So today is going to be an advancement on concepts we've been talking about in previous episodes. We're going to pin this thing down because I've been thinking about it quite a bit. I'm going to call this Program Universe. What that means is the universe is a program. Not a program that you're handed at the front of a reception, but a program with coders, instructions saved in some CPU that run based on a rule set. And I think we should have a conversation about who wrote it, how it maintains itself. And obviously I'm mixing metaphors between what we do as computer engineers here on planet Earth as human beings and what might be holding the universe together. But we're going to have fun looking at the two because I think we're going to learn something very basic about the universe. Now, if you're a Christian in America, you will be told something very early in your life, and that is a sentence designed to shut your brain down, like all things that are evil in the world. And that statement is all about that we are incapable as human beings to conceive of God and to conceive of how he works. And so we hear things like, God works in mysterious ways. And I think that those God and mysterious is sort of oil and water if you were to ask God. I don't really think he's trying to be an enigma to anyone. What is what is, and it is that way because it has to be that way. There isn't any parlor trick going on here. If we can increase our perception to see, better into the fingerprints of what he has done, then that is what we are allowed to do. And that's what this episode's about. Now, some of you might say, man, I got all kinds of shit to deal with in life. Last thing I've got time for are these existential conversations about the universe. And I would leave that up to you. I would never argue with you. You know your life. For those of you who have a little bit of time on your hands, this episode's definitely going to be for you. But this episode, just like, like a good screenplay or a good book, it usually hinges on one event in your brain that makes you write the whole book, that makes you write the whole script. It could be an event that becomes the theme of your entire script. It could be something that simply lures you towards finding a theme and a story and characters and that kind of stuff. But I've been throwing this idea at you guys. I've been throwing the idea at my close friends who I believe think along these terms about the world being the universe being a program, and the fact that it never seems to have any bugs. If you believed in the Mandela effect, whatever, you might think data slipping between time realms. Maybe we just had extremely bad teachers in pockets all across the United States where Eli Whitney was a black guy in one area, he's a white guy in another area. I've never had a single person say he was a white guy before I clarify that he was a white guy. But I've had plenty of people after I tell them it's a white guy go, oh, well, I thought he was a white guy. And it's like, so you know everything the second someone fucking tells you, but not the second before, right? But once I started explaining the universe as a program that never fails, you're not driving down the street and a black hole shows up. You don't run into a wall. You don't walk off a cliff in your living room. All these cool things. I see this epiphany in people's eyes who understand programming, and they understand that, holy shit, you're right. It doesn't matter what everything's made out of, whether you believe it's ethereal-based or some invisible force-based or whatever. You start to look at the universe differently. You start to realize that intelligent design would have to be a giant part of this. This cannot be some serendipitous something from nothing thing. So that's why I want to continue the conversation down this pipeline of saying, look, let's talk about the universe being a program. And I'm not really trying to get down to those of you who really want to believe it's a matrix in a computer data bank. Maybe. There's no problem with that in my brain. My only reason for kind of leaning away from that is that it really doesn't matter. We're here, right? We're not Jeff Bridges in Tron escaping what we are. You and I are the Rams and the Trons and the actual characters in the script, right? And honestly, I wouldn't know what to do if we escaped, But in this show, and this is where I got myself in some twisty logic problem. I've always described God as either, in my brain, it's my personal opinion, a single consciousness in the universe, if not the universe itself, right? Could be that every single ethereal particle in my model is, I should say, are the equivalent of a red blood cell of God. And that we are like many organisms inside of God's belly, right? And then there's the other theory, which is that we are all individual processors that combine together and become a neural net that is the universe, right? We are all the universe. Now, there are tons of variations, right? One of the variations is that there's only one being in the universe, and it's you and I and everyone else. And because time isn't a constraint, we are able to meet ourselves in different forms. And, if the irony of hell would be you're hurting yourself if you hurt anyone. The beauty is that if you love someone else, you love yourself. And that is why when you're convinced by social justice warriors and you're sort of self-loathing, super unintelligent folks in the world to chastise any form of self-awareness, self-appreciation, because it's lined up with being arrogant or egotistical or narcissistic, there are those people that will, cause their own demise beautifully. But if you have any inkling towards yourself, they want you to implode on yourself because they don't like themselves, right? Yes, this will be full of micro digressions. But now I started thinking about this thing. Now, if you think of the universe as a program that needs to be maintained, you sort of have the hardware and the software, right? The hardware, in one sense, could be essentially all of the energy that exists in the universe. And I would say, again, I think man's smallest trackable particle is an ethereal particle. It is smaller than the subatomic mass of a quark. It makes up everything else. The software is essentially all of the behavioral rules that are imposed on this mass. Because think about it. If energy didn't have very specific rules applied to it, and I don't even know how the hell you would do this, all of the energy in the universe would exist perhaps in the fourth dimension, which means it has no bearing of time. It can all exist at the same place. And it might just sit there and do nothing. It might just be a big freaking blob in space. If there were no gravity rules based on ethereal, depressions in pressure, it would maybe be equally diffused all over whatever container that it exists. So something is imposing rules on top of the hardware. So let me ask you, you think about your computer. I'm going to give you supernatural capabilities to see into the bowels of your laptop, of your desktop, of your telephone, and there's a bunch of shit in there. You've seen those photographs where they take apart phones and there's just hundreds, if not thousands, of little chips, little compressed ASIC chips in there, right? If I said, okay, here's a pair of tweezers, and you can reach through the casing of your device and just effortlessly pull a chip out right while your phone is running, right when the device is running, it's going to break. Shit's going to stop working. Sound will stop working. The voltage pattern of the IC board is going to transfer too much electricity to the next component because there's supposed to be resistance in there. It's going to fry one thing, and then that's going to fry the next. It's just going to blow up in your face like a Galaxy Note 7. And so we know, because we do not see the universe explode randomly, we don't see anomalies randomly. We know this program is working perfectly. Okay. The reason why I give you the little hardware removal story is because whatever is maintaining this is not being disassembled. Whatever is out there that maintains this existence, which might just be pure consciousness, of which we do not perceive consciousness as a force. We should. If you take the two models that I suggest in the show several times, and you've got God is at the center of the universe, a single entity, or us neural netted together, If God's a single center, and he maintains this through consciousness, and again, you can take all the alternate theories, put them in the bucket of just a single God, which is us being the single creature that meets each other, that goes in that bucket. And there's several others. He would have to pay attention to everything constantly, right? No matter how autonomic he has a nervous system, the whole universe is being held together by consciousness, by a beautiful flow of how things work together. Whether or not there's an emotion attached to that process, whether or not God feels elated by that process or not, that is completely immaterial at this point. Whether a CPU feels good about crunching numbers, nobody knows. But now cross over into my other idea, which is a neural net. All of us work together almost like brain cells in the universe to hold the universe together, again using consciousnness, but we're all together having worked together to design this particular instance of existence where there are electron clouds and and that's how we exist, right? What I typically refer to as the mass energy model, which is probably way too loose and way too non-specific. But now imagine that model, and one of us is born. And so we come down into the universe and we are born, and we are no longer participating in the program. This chip removal thing starts happening, right? I am leaving the collective consciousness of the Q, and I'm coming down to Earth and becoming human for a life cycle of this mortal coil, and then eventually the coil burns out and I return back to the collective. At that point, I've removed a hardware component, potentially a projector bulb of reality, from the overall subsystems that keep this thing together. So that model starts to deteriorate if you view it from that limited perspective. The other thing is that we really haven't discussed how souls, we've discussed it, we haven't figured out any theory of how souls are either created or destroyed. I don't think that's possible, but is there a finite number of souls in the universe and we're just having fun, glomming onto planets like Earth, being here up to a certain point? The population is definitely increasing. Where are these souls coming from? If there's a gigantic flood again, and we go back down to a few 100,000 souls on Earth, I guess we're all playing back up there at the playground, right? As you'll notice in my reincarnation episode, reincarnating somewhere else, right? But now let me throw you another view into the universe here about reality as it is created. We believe through paradigms that when a tree falls in the forest, it makes a sound. We believe that everything out there in the universe is processing right now, even though we can't see it. The backside of the moon actually exists, even though you can't see it and I can't see it without an instrument, an orbiting instrument. But what if it doesn't? What if nothing exists unless I see it, or you see it, or one of our fellow beings sees it or perceives it? Again, what if consciousness is not just a force, but it is the creation mechanism of all reality as perceived by what we are? I perceive this backyard. I perceive all of the vegetation around me. I am surrounded by green except for the house on the right. It soothes me. So the requirement starts to go down when you think about it that way, that each one of us has a halo of reality, of perception. As far as our eyes can see, as far as we're able to gain perception, we project inside of our minds this idea that it exists, because reality is only up here inside my brain, right? For me personally. Now, sure, if a plane were to fall out of the sky, maybe even though I can't conceive of that on any one day, it does fall out of the sky and I do get crushed by a plane. There's been planes that have, again, fallen into neighborhoods. Sorry for the gory analogy, but the idea that anyone that was injured on the ground all conceived of this happening at the same exact time is astronomically against, right? So it seems like reality happens even though we don't perceive it to happen. But then there's cross-pollination of realities. If you have the ability to manifest reality through your consciousness and your perception, through, the sphere around you, which they call typically the halo, right? And I have my own halo. It could be, technically speaking, your halo is bigger than mine because your brain is more apt to dream up reality. Mine could be a little smaller. But regardless, there's a proximity we can get into where our two realities create a union zone between the two, right? A crossover point between the two. And that's when you get, I think, quite frankly, the most amazing algorithms in life. That's why I think relationships are phenomenal, because you're bringing two independent consciousness together. And you can resonate bigger with two forces resonating on each other than a single one trying to resonate super fast and hard by itself. Every business that I've ever dreamed up with my partners, I had this idea, or they had the idea, they bring it to me, I have more ideas. And together, it becomes 10x, 100x. The amount of money that we generate is, 10x, 100x, 1000x. And that's the beauty of bringing life together, right? So before we continue any further, I just want to encourage you from this point forward for the rest of your life to look at reality as a program that is running, and it has hardware and it has force that is applied to the hardware that might be the software, the rules. I don't want to limit your mind at all. What I want you to do is think of what overall gigantic ecosystem of mechanical engineering would make this thing happen. And if you're an atheist, let me tell you, again, I was out of Christianity by the age of 8. I didn't get back into it and dabble in it until 18. So I had 10 years of uber scientific research. And I studied everything, people. I studied, physics and electronics and robotics and artificial intelligence and space and, everything you could possibly think of. And my goal was to find the answer. My goal was to find the alternate theory to God. It's like I didn't believe in God. For some reason, there was a fundamental belief in God. It wasn't out of fear or anything like that. But there are no answers. There's just absolutely more and more questions. But there becomes that chicken and egg concept where you're asking yourself, where did intelligent movement and intelligent mechanisms introduce themselves into the universe? Where did that occur? Like I'm telling you right now, if all of the energy in the universe is the hardware and then the software are all the rules that are imposed on that energy, where did the software come from? You're telling me that out of an atheist belief system, there is just a bunch of serendipitous realities that happen to nurture life? I could sit down a mathematician and put his brain through the Krill machine and from Forbidden Planet and augment his brain 100 times and give him, as much paper and pen as he needs and ask him to make an algorithm that is love. Show me how adding shit together, subtracting stuff, dividing, multiplying, squaring, whatever, cosine, sine stuff, and show me love in an algorithm, and you won't be able to do it. And yet it exists, doesn't it? One of the saddest things about us human beings is that we have this sort of lowbrow need to have everything be physically tangible before it's allowed to exist, right? The slider has to be touchable, otherwise it doesn't exist, right? And the problem is that, well, I should say the irony and the pathetic nature of man is that we know for a fact that love exists, sadness exists, happiness exists, right? We know that. But these things are supposed to be intangible. And of course, you'll have your Kurzweils that talk about, there's a tough one when you think about how, adrenaline can create thrills and dopamine can create addiction and suffering. And the deprivation of the two can create fear and desperation and docileness, right? So you can definitely injure the vessel of the human body or introduce chemicals into the human body and sway emotions incredibly, right? There's all these pharmaceutical drugs that make us want to kill ourselves, right? Brings on first depression and then death. Isn't it interesting that in the 80s and 90s, you well, maybe the 90s it started, but in the 80s and before, all pharmaceutical drugs that were manufactured didn't have these depression side effects in bulk. And now it is almost a synthetic design imperative that depression become part of the side effects, because with with pharmaceutical companies owned by these giant cartel banks, they want you to kill yourself. They want you dead. They want the population to go down the tubes, and they want you to drag as many people with you as possible, psychologically speaking, right? Again, I come from a teeny hometown, and I've had two people, one guy in my grade and one guy, I think 1 year younger than me. While his families are eating upstairs, they were on these pharmaceutical drugs. They were man's men. They wanted to get off that shit and own their own life. But then depression hit them super hard and super irrationally. They go downstairs and they blow their brains out, leaving the families upstairs to find their bodies, deal with all the shock, and potentially be destroyed, because that's what happened to their father. All the responsibility of a pharmaceutical company, and just because they say in the disclaimer that you could suffer from depression, there's hardly a lawyer that can sue them, right? Because we've allowed big pharma lobbyists, some of the most evil fucktards on planet Earth. If you have a pharmaceutical lobbyist in your family, you were looking at a fucking coward or an evil cocksucker. You are. They are trying to peddle shit in some cowardly way where they just need the money, so they're willing to screw over civilization, right? I mean, if you can bring me a drug that has no side effects, that ain't hurting anybody, then fine. They're not so bad. But it's hard to ignore the side effect panel. Microdigressions. Here we go. Now, why talk about the program that runs the universe? What's the benefit? Well, let's talk about any expansion of consciousness. There are some things that are going to be expansion of consciousness which reveal the unknown about consciousness, right? We simply won't know. We can talk about it at length, and all we've done is define and put more observable reality into the unknown, in that we just simply don't know how that happens. And so, for those of us who feel comfortable with the unknown, the unknown is sort of a to-do list. Let's try to figure out something in the unknown bucket. Okay, reach inside, pick something out, and have a conversation. Then there's another column of the antithesis of the unknown, which is that we totally know or think we know what's going on in a particular area. For anything that we think we know, the cool thing is that there's usually some indicator within our thought process at any one point in time, whether we be wrong or right, of who is controlling that particular result, that indication in the reality that we believe, right? Like I said, there's a fairly decent theory that God controls everything. There's a single consciousness. Then there's the idea that perhaps we potentially just project reality around us, and because we can overlap all of our realities once we get within a proximity of our spherical halo of creation, we can start to share things. I can hear the kid next door playing in the backyard right now. She has her own consciousness. She's making her own decisions, and we're sharing that moment. She can make a sound, and it comes into my bubble. I'm staring at an infinite blue sky right now. Well, I'm really not staring completely into the bowels of the universe, because what I'm looking at is a reflection off the atmosphere that's blue, right? But now we've talked about on this show several times, that especially in the existential episode, that perhaps we control the universe ourselves. They always talked about Steve Jobs having a reality distortion field around him, and I can tell you it's a choice that you have one of those. I have one of those as well. You probably do as well. Or if you don't have one at this split second, you've had one in the past for sure. There's been something in your life that had all the odds stacked against you, but for whatever reason you felt, this is possible. The universe, through Gnostic implants, is telling me this is possible. Even though it's never been done before, we can do it. As a leader, as a head of a company, for instance, you must have a reality distortion field from time to time, because your employees are always going to, they're going to be one of two types of employees. There are employees that are just like you, that say everything is possible, we'll figure it out, and those are extremely hard gems to find on the beach, right? The other ones are extremely talented, but they have a natural inertia to say, that sounds hard. I don't want to feel that way because, when something's hard, it's tough to do, right? And so you have to be that positive force that says, no, you can do it. Trust me. I believe in you and you can do it. And sometimes in those people's lives, it is the very first time they've ever heard someone believe in them. And that in itself is enough stimulation to do it. And once you have respect from someone and show them that you work just as hard as they do, if not harder, they will work overnight to please you and then eventually realize the gift is for them. It's not for you. I'll tell you a story. And this is one of my favorite stories for kind of breaking through perceivable barriers. So I've mentioned a couple of times on the show I was privileged enough to work with LL Cool J. What we did for that guy is build him an online music studio such that you could edit a song with multiple players anywhere, multiple participants anywhere in the world. And you could put down a track and someone else could listen to it complete across the world, and you could flip the control of the studio to them and they could record their voice down and flip it back to you. You put a beat down, all this cool stuff. But I was contacted by a friend of a friend who went to Stanford, and he said, I heard you got this new company and you just have this reputation of being able to do the impossible. So we think you might be able to help us because we're at the end of our road with this project and we're about to close it up. And I was having a conversation and someone said, you need to talk to Mark. So it's like May or something. And I get this phone call and they brief me on the project. They tell me who it is. And Cool J was a gigantic influence to me. Just see the song Breakthrough by in the Bigger and Deffer album. That was my mantra when I first came to California. So the history of the project was that he had been trying for 15 months with a single coder to do this project. And it had utterly and completely failed. And so I said, send me everything you got. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is not a conducive interface for what you're trying to do. So I redrew the entire interface personally, redesigned it, did all the back-end architecture on paper, handed it off to my engineers and my game company, and I just said, this is what we're going to have to do. Then the engineers added their own research and started working with some modules that exist out there. 45 days after I shook his hand at the Four Seasons in L.A., we were in William Morris Agency in L.A., and I got Cool J and his staff, and then we have his producer in Buffalo, New York. That guy has a copy of the software. We have a copy of software on our end. He lays down a track, and boom, right in front of Cool J, there's the track. Cool J raps on top of it. Marquise can see it in Buffalo. Done. Prototype proven. That took us 45 days to do that. After it was over, after about 30 minutes of going back and forth, he just looked up at me and he goes, you know what, man? He goes, I have been told for 15 months that this is impossible. And you just did it. And I just looked at him and said, that's how we roll, And we continued working on it for a year. Ended up getting sold with the Sony laptops. Pre-installed on the front of the box. It was really cool. He did a huge Grandmaster Flash presentation of it. It was really cool. I tell you that little digression, not to impress you, but to impress upon you that the reality distortion field is extremely real. And when you have an energized group of folks and a vision, there's two types of visions. There's a spoken vision that you can put into words, and then there's just this feeling vision that happens. When Steve Jobs wanted the Apple computer to be created, the Macintosh computer to be created, the story is he walks in the room with the book, puts it on the table, and says, I want the footprint of the computer to fit within that book. And it wasn't a big book. And everyone kind of said, how the hell are we going to do that? And he said, I don't know, but you're going to do it. And 15 engineers, hardware and software engineers, labored and sweated and cried and shouted and all this other stuff and got it done. And it changed the world. It absolutely changed the world. Any computer you use today mocks the Macintosh computer, which is AKA supported by Xerox PARC's very ugly GUI back in the day. Now let's pull back a little bit on this anatomy of the universe that I've been alluding to, the hardware and software idea, because this is where we can start splitting hairs just a little bit. when it comes to what is the hardware made out of and where did it come from? What is the software made out of and how does it have a relationship with the hardware? And where did it come from? If you at all can conceive of nothing, which I think most of us are now potentially surrendering to this concept of an is, which is very, very difficult because we don't exist as humans, then we exist, then we don't exist. So for us, we have bookends of not existing within the metaphor of our existence, if you don't believe in a soul especially. But the universe doesn't have these bookends where it doesn't exist, then it exists, then it doesn't exist, right? Now Hawking's come up with some goofy-ass theories about a Big Bang and the fact that it just keeps expanding and collapsing, expanding and collapsing. This whole thing's been going on for infinity. Maybe. But despite when anyone tells you in science they cannot see the edge of the universe, they can't, right? All they can see is the edge of their instrumentalities looking out into space. And because we now know that there are so many lies coming in from NASA and GPL about every image they say they've captured from space, it may just be all artist renderings. It may be, But now here's the big question. Was any of this created at all? If you believe in an is, or you try to toy with the concept of an is, infinity plural is, I was always the imaginary number because it's infinity. It's the first letter of the word infinity, right? The idea that somehow this all exists, and then it also inherits a software model, to use a metaphor, a rule structure that actually creates life and has balance, is phenomenal. Where would all that come from? Here's my instinct on this whole thing. If the is essentially what happens, or what is, I should say. If is reality. God, this gets crazy. It's not like Bill Clinton trying to deny spooging all over Lewinsky. That I think there would be a precedence for the notion that you could take a bunch of Legos and throw them around a bedroom and all of a sudden it creates the Neuschwanstein castle. You could take any sort of simulation in a computer and run it and it would somehow create artificial life. Because what we're saying is that randomness is so utterly powerful that it almost inherently creates life just because it exists. And that's not what we're seeing. Stephen Wolfram. Again, I'll remind you that his gigantic book, which I showed on the, I believe, the Holographic Universe episode, it's a book that through using his product Mathematica, he was able to determine that too many random particles creates a pattern, like 5 and over create patterns eventually, even though it might start off pretty chaotic. You might think that having 100 different shaped Lego pieces is going to keep you from ever creating a pattern if you randomly put them together. In his algorithm, his growth algorithms, he found out that it creates a pattern eventually. 2 and under creates a pattern, but 3 to 4 create full randomness. It's amazing. With very few unique properties, you get infinite randomness. I haven't seen that, let's put it that way. I played in the dirt when I was a kid. I made sandcastles from time to time, and at no point did something just create itself. Now, obviously, with, the randomization of things, you can have things look like things. Unfortunately, I think most of the Mars footage is created with a product called Terrigen, or a derivative thereof. That creates, Mars surfaces and that sort of thing. And you're able to see Terrigen in action in the Martian movie. But every once in a while, we'd create something that looks like a VW bug. Randomness is going to do that. But what we don't see is an ecosystem of life. The software on this planet seems to have sort of 3 different forms of, or maybe 4 different forms of life that adhere to perhaps the gravity model that we have. So we have plant life, and when plant life is stuck into the ground, it creates roots. There's different root levels and different blooms and stuff because of the algorithms that are in its genetics. But overall, it has a stem. It has, palm trees are kind of weird because they're bushes that keep going up. But they're very similar. when you have birds, they have obviously wings, they have smaller feet, and they can fly. They have an architecture all to themselves. Fish, they have fins, they have gills, they have an architecture that supplies that ecosystem with its mechanism to exist. And then everything that's on the surface of the planet outside of water has at least a bipedal body unit, right? You know, even an insect that like a centipede is a bunch of bipedal units that are attached together to create a multi-leg unit, right? An ant has 3 body units, both with 2 legs apiece. We seem to have melded our pelvis and our torso together, so we seem to be a bipedal quadrilimb being. And that has to be, like I said, I believe in the evolution episode number 2, I talk about, you know, if you take a sphere and you put it into a gravity-based world, it's going to hit a surface. And when it hits a surface, there are going to be erosion points on the epidermis/cellular wall of that being, and it's going to create ruptures. And when those ruptures happen, cellular tissue starts falling out of a rupture, creating an extension that might be perceived as a leg. And then through randomness or through just wiggling it as a means of trying to use the mass that is your body, you're going to start traveling and traversing on the surface. And when that starts happening, you immediately, you know, when you grow a couple of these things, you're lifting yourself off the ground, thus reducing the amount of erosion and scraping on the ground that made the first limbs in the first place. By the time you have 4, you no longer have a belly that is necessarily touching the ground so bad that it's going to scrape you and let another limb out. So I think that a lot of these things are built into the model of what happens. But we don't, again, have a bunch of useless mass in this universe, do we? I mean, you could argue perhaps the moon is sort of a weird being, a weird creation that hovers out there. Any moon out there on a planet, why the hell does a planet have a moon? Is it assisting Jupiter in existing? Not really, you know. Our moon has been told to, you know, churn the oceans, which is why we have life on Earth. There's people who contest that. But now the other real twist for your brain is whether or not anything really exists at all in the physical form. Now, for those of you who don't know how 3D movies are created, or CG, meaning computer graphic stuff, is created all over the world, you know, none of that stuff exists, right? There's been no they don't build a transformer that's, you know, 10 stories high and then animate it somehow with hydraulics in front of a camera. They don't usually do that unless they want a serious in-camera effect for some reason. And so it's all done with computer graphics. Well, someone explains what they think they want the thing to look like. Someone starts sketching it. They start bidding on those, you know, the drawings, and they like one and they don't. Then it gets turned into a full-blown sketch. Then it gets turned into 3D models. It turns into polygons, textures. Then it gets animated. It gets rigged and animated, right? But at no point does that thing physically exist. But once all that comes together and is projected on your television or your silver screen, because you believe that those shapes and those colors represent reality in your brain, it totally exists. The dinosaurs from Jurassic Park exist in your brain. Well, what's the difference between that and your imagination? We know that when we go to sleep, we dream, and I think it is fairly clear that we're not really physically there. But we have the experience, and we enjoy it most of the time. Then there's the second question. Now, I am perceiving a bunch of things that I believe were invented in the last 100 years. The video camera I'm staring into, I believe that that is an invention that was invented in the last 30 years. The computer that's recording the audio, I believe that was created in the last 15 years in terms of the exact form I'm looking at, etc. around my patio, right? So if it is something that is simulated, or if it's even this is thing, where did all the designs come from? Where did the red robin come from? Where did the Homo sapien come from? Because let me tell you, even though we perceive time through the recording of state changes in our brains, right, our body is able to store what happened yesterday, or it's at least able to retrieve from our souls or the universe at large, what happened yesterday and the day before that. Some of us have really good memories, some of us don't have such great memories. But overall, there's a memory and there's a perception of time. I like to joke that, one of the times that you can perceive time the most is when you injure yourself and there's a recovery phase. If you buy a house, there's this mortgage in front of it, right? They're trying to save money to buy something. You look at the investment over time that it's going to take to fully be free of it. Even if you love a video game and you're like, oh my God, Metal Gear Solid 8 came out and then there's 50 hours of cutscenes and, I'm only a mortal human being. And so you realize that you'll be stuck in this game for 6 months if you play it. So let's go one step closer towards the simulator idea of things. Because I know a lot of you are putting thoughts into this, and I want you guys to share in the comments where you are with that. Link to any videos that you believe have really brought on amazing thought processes. So one of the concepts is that you could have a reality outside of this one. It is utterly and completely different in all ways, or perhaps, we are created metaphorically in its own image. And through whatever struggle that universe was created by, whether it had a beginning and it currently is in a good state, someone as an engineer of that, from that universe, could create this universe in a home computer. And there's a bunch of pre-existing software that says, do you want plant life in this universe? Yes, click the checkbox. Do you want, reptilian aliens? And leave that one unchecked. And you go on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, the who, what, where, when, how of our universe becomes very incidental. Now, again, all I've done is defer the mystery to another universe. We still haven't, again, it's like the turtle theory where someone said, the Earth is a flat disc on the back of a turtle, and then its turtles all the way down. There's this paradox of, passing the buck into infinity. The interesting exercise you can do with your mind is to simply say, what would be the most fundamental state of existence where one is alive? Let's just strip off all the bells and whistles off this world. There are no, jeans and shirts and video cameras. There's none of that. Go back, like Altered States, the movie with William Hurt. Go all the way back to the beginning of the inceptional point of time. I shouldn't even say time. The inceptional point of all existence, and tell me what you think would be there. What would be the most fundamental recorded or recordable metric of existence? What is it? In that film, it was an absolute nothing. It was the infinite nothingness that utterly and completely freaked him out in the end. And when he came back to reality in the end, he thanked his lucky stars that even though he didn't understand how we got here, he was so glad we did. And what they portrayed the beginning as was the most incredible, mind-bending hell you could possibly imagine. It had nothing to do with fire and brimstone whatsoever. What it had to do with was, the infinite isolation, the infinite loneliness, and the idea that you could scream into the universe and there was no one to listen to you. There wasn't even sound to carry your scream anywhere. You just felt your body maybe vibrating as you did it. Now, luckily, there's a gigantic logic problem with that as well, right? Where would your initial life come from? The fascination of intelligent design is a beautiful thing once you, again, start to study the fact that everything that has finished any sort of life cycle and it is considered a member of this universe has beauty, right? Every animal, every insect, every plant, even stars and planets are just gorgeous objects, right? Constellations are beautiful. The Milky Way is beautiful. Everything is gorgeous. And it seems that there's an imperative on top of reality to make sure we don't have randomness. We don't have big giant blobs of flesh floating in the sky that have no purpose, that have no consciousness. They're just there because they're there. That doesn't happen. Couldn't it have happened? I mean, couldn't it have happened where there are pockets of gravity where things just kind of metabolize up there and they're gigantic cancerous tumors just flying up above us? I don't see it. I don't see anything remotely like that. So what's interesting is that we use the creationist algorithm, the intelligent design algorithm to say this is all intelligently designed, and we may all sit at a table and say this is. We all agree on that. Now, go back one step before, because we're talking about the programmer, the architect. What world would the architect live in to architect us? Who made that world? Starts to hurt, doesn't it? What's interesting about conceiving of an is, in order to get to the engineer that would make all this software and hardware, is the notion that perhaps as a human being we might all get on the same page and talk about this for 10 years straight. And after talking about it 10 years straight, all of us drink the orange juice in the morning and we say, okay, I think we're all on the same page about an is. There absolutely was no beginning to the universe, and so we're here. Fantastic. But we still, I think, have the notion of a beginning, where at some point the universe wasn't that intelligent, it wasn't that amazing, and then all of a sudden it is amazing and it is intelligent, and boy, aren't we at the tip of the spear when it comes to that experience. We're the pinnacle of all of its creation, humbling ourselves only to God. That's how most sentient beings work, right? But the true nature of it would be, if anything is infinite, then we go back as far as the infinity itself. That would mean that if human beings ever existed, we would have always existed, because why would there ever be a moment in infinite time where we don't exist? It makes no sense, does it? If we live in any type of an infinite container, the idea is if we live in an infinite container by ourselves, have we always been here? Are we destined to continue being here? When the theory of the dinosaurs was manufactured in the 1800s, it started to put a different spin on what humanity is, right? It makes us feel extremely temporary to know that there was a group of creatures that were massive and formidable, and somehow even in their formidable, almost invincible nature, they were wiped out. But as I think Eric Dubay has done some amazing research, unless he is lying through his teeth, if they only found a tooth, okay, in the 1800s, 7 years after a theorized paper that dinosaurs existed, and then they fictionally created a dinosaur around that tooth, and the dinosaurs that they ended up finding later on, 40 years later, ended up looking exactly like this imaginary thing that they had just made from nothing. Then we know the whole thing is a lie. And this idea that we never existed, then existed, and that we're going to demise at some point, it may not have as much truth as you think, right? Now, for those who worry about atomic bombs and planet Earth and that sort of thing, well, and us doing ourselves in, perhaps through some, laboratory experiment gone bad, or some cataclysmic weather condition, I can see where one would think that that's possible. That man has plenty of reasons and plenty of ways that man could extinguish himself, right? But then the algorithm starts to go a different way. You write a program that allows this universe to exist, and perhaps the program has no bias towards what actually survives the equation. Perhaps we're only here to make a certain gene sequence, a certain crystalline sequence go forward to the next level. Then we have carried the baton of life, and something else picks it up, and it is resynthesized into a brand new life force, which, similar to man, is not man. Perhaps we're participating in that ecosystem, and something else participated in our ecosystem. If birds are simply the extension of dinosaurs, if that were to be true in any way, shape, or form, which I don't think it is, that's just a relic of the fact they used bird bones to synthesize fake dinosaur bones, and then eventually they made the correlation because, of course, you base the fictional character off a real character. A bipedal being is a bipedal being, and all the bipedal beings that have ever existed in the solar system / universe, whether it be gray aliens, reptilians, whatever, perhaps we're all going for a common goal. The smartest people I know on this planet, all right, believe that we were gene spliced and created through some alien intervention. And I say it that way so you don't take it lightly. We've done a tremendous amount of research. I covered a lot of this in the episode 2 back in season 1. I think there are genetic smoking guns that prove that we are gene spliced into the history of hominids / bipedal beings on this planet. Now, let's say you believe that. You believe that as well. Maybe you don't even have the research, but you're like, man, that just makes sense. Look at us, man. We're so much different than everything else. And as much as a big gorilla can do sign language, they're way behind mankind, right? So when you think about gene splicing and us being upgraded at some point in some massive way, you really are given perhaps 2 real theories of how that could take place. Maybe a fringy third if you think that at some point a bunch of monkeys ate either enough bananas to get the radioactive potassium to miraculously create a new being that was Homo sapien, or they're playing around with uranium rocks and it happens through absolute happenstance, which I think is just astronomically full of shit. But you have 2. You have God himself saying, enough of this bullshit. I'm going to create man. Boom. And I'm going to try to create the one that's closest to my image, perhaps, for those of you who are religious. You would obviously be more apt to create a duplicate of yourself because you're more informed about who you are than anything else you can observe, because you are who you are, right? The other one is to say that an alien race that simply got there first, somewhere in the universe, they were there first. Serendipitously, through evolution, everything happened right for them. And so then they have the ability to engineer life. A man will eventually get there. I mean, look at the amazing inroads we have in transhumanism. As fucked up as that whole objective is right now by a bunch of crazy psychopaths and sociopaths, they are engineering the science to cure themselves of all their ailments, right? The nerd wants to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. The ugly girl wants to be Claudia Schiffer, right? Kurtzwell wants to live forever. I'm sure Kurtzwell, if he can continue living, not eating food and just popping pills all day long, if he can end up living, 100 years through that regiment, which I doubt that's going to happen, but if he could, he will be the first guy to volunteer his brain for computer uploading. He will. But now, if an alien does it, it makes a lot more sense to the way we perceive reality. Someone physically comes down to this blue marble and starts messing around with everyone who's here. Okay. And again, if we're in a petri dish, flat disk, dark firmament dome, same exact thing, same scenario. They are merely the owners of the dome, and we're in here as little pygmies in some experiment, right? But if God does it, it goes back up to the software level, right? The hardware is already here. The ethereal winds that make up all things that are translated into frequencies that we call atoms, that we call light. It's all the same shit. God does his thing. Types it up, clickety-click, clack, click, return, boom, you have mankind. An upgrade. Then the question would pose itself from a creation standpoint. Why did you ever create an inferior man in the first place, a hominid? Why'd you ever do that? Does God think that slowly? Does an infinite being really have to go through the steps of, I was just thinking about this, and then I was thinking about that? I don't think so. It wouldn't take mankind that long. If mankind had the ability, to create the earth, create the first blue algae, evolve that up to fish and gillless creatures that can maybe walk on the planet, and then all of a sudden they go upright into monkeys, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't need that much time to decide that you wanted a much more intelligent being. One of the guys that really put a lot of thought into this was Will Wright, the inventor of the video game SimCity, and then The Sims, and all kinds of other things. He did Space Sims. I mean, he's a brilliant guy. Still exists, obviously. He created a game that flopped miserably at EA, but it was a R&D game that changed the world called Spores. And Spores is a video game where you create a single-cell life form, you start giving it attributes of life, and then it continues evolving into you eat enough food and kill enough predators or kill enough of your prey and upgrade, and you go up and up and up to the point you're a creature on the surface of the planet, which you can have as many arms and legs and beaks and whatever the hell you want, and you eventually start building homes and buildings and building a world. But he did something, well, put it this way, when you play the game, you become God, is really what happens. And all of that intellectual decision-making process, which has never been given to you before in any other metaphor, is all of a sudden at your fingertips. You get to feel yourself make a decision. Do I really want this being to be like this, like that? And you start to decide what is beauty. You may use a beak because it's the only thing the game allows you to use at this particular evolutionary point. And then as soon as you can get the beak off your creature, you replace it with a nose. Because you don't like the way the beaks look. One of the other very brilliant things that they did in this game was that when the administrators wanted to look into your world to see how you were doing, they would show up as UFOs. Round flying disc UFOs. And if you logged into your game and you saw a disc UFO, you knew that someone from EA headquarters was looking at your game. Very interesting, right? Sadly, the game, it sort of lacked a repetitive element, and so it sort of disappeared. But the infrastructure they built for that game was phenomenal. And just as a small digression, the thing that they did that was ultra brilliant and became very instrumental with 4K video games, even 1080p video games, was that they started writing software to create designs for them. So when video games became high-res and 16:9 1080p flat screen stuff and then advanced up 2K, 4K, they knew that you couldn't hire enough artists to really fill up a city with junk. And so they realized they needed to write algorithms to populate the worlds themselves. So they give them, aluminum cans and dust piles and all kinds of other stuff, and the software was able to digitally synthesize up rubble so that you didn't have to do it yourself. You have a bombed out, Call of Duty world or even Fallout 4 type worlds. And then, of course, you run the algorithm and then humans clean it up to make sure nothing happened wrong. But they were one of the first. But I will tell you that in my travels, those of you who are very existential in life and think about these sorts of things, you have been more addicted to games like that, God games where you play around. And you're humbled. You're humbled in these games where you start to feel the responsibility of people. And the more that artificial intelligence is programmed into the non-player characters that simulate into existence because of your video game, you start to feel compassion for them. And it's really healthy for the brain. But in closing, let's throw out this idea very quickly here. I started out this conversation with two paradigms of existence that work together, hardware and software. Then we added sort of a third paradigm, which is the force of consciousness, our ability to project reality, right? Okay. What if there was only one paradigm of existence and one tool and one thing that makes it all happen? Let's fold it back into consciousness. The hardware and software perceptions of reality are merely a implementation of consciousness. There's nothing worse than looking for more parts than are required to make something happen. Regardless of what the pieces and parts are, think about the fact that we seem to agree on this plane of existence in the pieces and parts. Is that through subconscious indoctrination of a young soul? Is the incubation period for life merely a way of indoctrinating and molding this generic soul into the belief systems that we consider life, right? So a woman carries a human being, up to 9 months, right? You can usually give birth between 6 and 9 months without having any massive complications. Got friends of mine that were born a little after 6 months, and they've been fine their whole life, you know. But what if we're holding that soul in the body, and through mental processes we indoctrinate the perception of where you're coming into this life, and we say, this is what life is, this is what life is, and we're indoctrinating. There is mass, there is energy, there is love, there is hate. And we impose that on the life, and so that by the time it's birthed, it has a general perception of the world, but perhaps the reason why, you know, human beings cry, otherwise, I meant to say we don't necessarily have to swat our babies if they're awake. But perhaps why a baby cries is because they feel like, in one way, they're at William Hurt's third act of Altered States, and what they're being born into is very confusing. We've already proven that children are psychic. They have to mentally communicate with their parents to stay safe, right? But everything incubates. Every animal incubates. Every insect incubates. Isn't that interesting? Now you might say, well, it's just physically necessary because they have to have a body to have instrumentalities to exist. They have to be able to move around and grab food and put it in their mouth. There was that horrible experiment I learned in psychology class back in junior college about the maternity ward that experimented with not hugging babies that were freshly born, and as the story was told to me twice, all the babies started dying. And all the nurses rushed in and started holding children and trying to keep them from living, but they all fucking said goodbye. You guys are a bunch of assholes. There was a need to bond with a child that was born. Otherwise the child just says, I don't sense life here. I don't sense the invite anymore, so I'm gone. Don't worry about me. I'm recycling. But shame on you. Now let's also think about the friends that we know or the acquaintances that we know that have been heavily sheltered in the world. And they seem like zombies, don't they? With bad parents or with good parents that simply don't leave their township, you know, their little 6-mile square. They're just lost. You will talk to them and they can't understand the words coming out of your mouth. They get an overall sense of what you are, but they don't really have the ability to conversate because they simply haven't experienced that much of the software, of the perception. But they have the bare minimum, don't they? The bare minimum to feed themselves, clothe themselves, and maybe, you know, earn enough money to make the next generation of zombies, right? So why labor about this particular subject? Is it just a gimmick to push the mind to the limits of perception? Well, that definitely happens, right? It's not a bad thing that happens. I think on one level we have the mystery of life that we want to unravel. We want to understand it better. Where the fuck are we? Who the hell are we? Where did this all start? Do I have a purpose I'm unaware of? I think on another level, we all question what's possible. Do I have the ability to do 10 times the amount that I'm doing with my life, but through perception and constraints of perception, I don't achieve that wondrous world that is mine for the taking? I think that's true as well. For me, I think I've met enough people, not that many, but enough, that some people view the world as the enemy. They view reality as an enemy. And I'm putting that in a metaphorical term, but the idea is they are unable to figure out what the hell's going on. And so it becomes an enemy. And they sort of dislike waking up in the morning. They dislike a day of life. And that's why I really try to push deeper into what reality is and sort of lighten the load a little bit on, anything that's perceived as negative, to expand the tool set, So I feel like if they bought the whole, 6-foot Craftsman tool set full of something in every single drawer, They open all the drawers and all they find is one, combination wrench. That's all they find in there, right? I'm trying to get them to close the door, think a little bit, pull the door back open, and there it is. There's 50 tools in there. And then they think a little bit further, and they pull the second door open, and there's 50 tools that do something completely different. And once you notice that you actually have tool drawers full of completely different sets of brilliantly engineered tools, the epiphanies start to wash over you, and it starts to energize your soul, and it takes you from being depressed to being so elated that if I were to ask you to describe how excited you are with life, you just freeze up, and you just, all you can do is crack a smile. That's all you got left, because you're like, fuck, dude, just get out of my way, man. I'm going to sit in this garage, and I'm going to create something special. That garage being your life. The law of attraction is extremely powerful, and I would think that the law of attraction is merely a term that we use to describe our own ability to create something. I think regardless of how the software, hardware, creator, architect works, we have been given the power to modify our halo of existence, our spherical bubble of existence, to the ability we have the perseverance to continue thinking the creation algorithm, and to the ability that we have the faith to believe and perceive accurately what we're trying to do. We can make it happen. It's interesting that when you learn something new, what's fascinating about it is that you remember when you didn't know how to do it. You remember feeling the fleeting ignorance of not knowing how to do something. Like if you wanted to illustrate an eyeball, for instance, you might go, I don't know how to do that. The second you learn, there's a couple things that happen. One, you perceive yourself before, and you look back on yourself, you're like, oh, that's funny. I used to think this was so difficult, but it's not. Once you do it, you start to realize that there's an infinite combinations of how to do it. You can draw infinite number of eyeballs, and they're all going to be different. They will. I think that's a crude metaphor for reality. So I hope you feel me on this one. I think it's a new avenue of perception that is very fun to think through. I would love to encourage you guys to give it some thought, post some comments in there. And again, if you have videos that are on target, there's a few of you that have been doing us all a big service, and you're finding videos that either are related, or they take the conversation a lot further, or they're good precursors to this conversation. You're posting them in there. Just to explain YouTube for 1 second. For those of you who don't have a YouTube account, you get 3 troughs that comments are actually categorized into. There's the ones that are immediately approved. There's the ones that are held for review, and then there's the ones that are marked as likely spam. You'll never know the difference between those that post and those that are likely spam, because likely spam goes through. I just get a chance to approve it. If you post a video, it goes into likely spam. I think if you post lots of videos, you can get graduated up to being reviewed, and that means you'll post and no one will see it. I don't know if you see it when it's held, but I see it, and so it takes me about 12 to 24 hours to get in there and look at everything. I'm telling you right now, out of thousands and thousands of comments in these videos, there's maybe been 2 or 3 that people were trying to link to their bands or link to some weird buy a Rolex from China. So we're good. Anyway, deepthoughtsradio.com for all the feeds. There's audio if you're on video. There's video if you're on audio. There's a closed Facebook group. Just go to that site and click that and join. The Facebook page is going to disappear, so just brace for that. So if you don't find that and you hear about it narrated and I give you the URL in the bumper, that's where that went. Just go to deepthougtsradio.com, click the Facebook icon. I think that's about it. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.